Hello, class. Welcome to our video. Are you comfortable at home? Thank you for joining me today. Let's get started. So in today's video, 2 minutes will be Chapter 7 Bell Ringer. 5 minutes will be the summary of Chapter 7. 10 minutes, we will read together Chapter 8. And finally, 3 minutes will be summaries, writing your summary, and next week's homework. So let's get started. The bell ringer for chapter 7. What is the name of the river in chapter 7? What did you say? The correct answer is C, Nile, the Nile River. The Nile River is the biggest river in the world, so we will read about that. Remember this map in your book? Here is where Salva and his group is. If you look at the distance, maybe they have walked about 300 kilometers, which would be walking from Gyeongju to Seoul. Question 2. Who is sick? B. Akir is sick. Who is Akir? Remember, Akir is Naya's little sister. Okay, let's review chapter 7. Did you enjoy this chapter? In this chapter, there are 3 main events. Number 1, Akir is very weak and sick. Number 2, Muriel was killed by a lion. Salva is sad and terrified. Terrified means very scared because his friend is gone. And then number 3, Salva's group arrives at the Nile River and they build boats. So let's review some of the passages. We will first talk about Akir is very weak and sick. Okay, let's look at this section. Naya sat on the floor. She reached out and took her little sister's hand. This is the action of reaching out. Akir did not seem to notice. She laid curled on her side, hardly moving, silent except for an occasional whimper. So this is a curl. So when you are curled on your side, you're laying like this. And a whimper is kind of a sad and pitiful sound. This is whimper in Korean. Naya is frightened. Naya is scared because 2 days before, Akir had complained noisily, like, oh, my stomach hurts. I'm not good. I feel bad. And at length. And at length means for a long time. If something has length, it is long. But now, her sister no longer had enough strength to complain. So now, Akir is too weak to talk and complain. So Akir is sick. And this is a common illness. Naya knew many people. It's a stomach illness, and most adults and older children recovered, but they might suffer off and on for years. Off and on means a pattern of being sick, then not sick, then sick, then not sick for years. And then it can really be dangerous for the elderly and small children. They are unable to hold anything in their systems. Their systems is their digestive systems. So, in this paragraph, this page, here is the important information. Akir has been sick for 2 days. She is too weak to talk. Akir's stomach sickness is common. Now, there is a medical clinic, a small hospital, a few days' walk, at least 3 days walking, from the lake camp. Naya's family is deciding if they should or should not go to the clinic. Okay, moving on. The walking began again. Salva shook with terror, inside and out. Salva is so afraid. He clung to Uncle like a baby or little boy, hanging on to his hand or shirt tail when he could, never letting Uncle get farther than an arm's length away. So Salva is very scared. Why? Well, Mariel is gone. He was eaten by a lion. There were people watching, but with the wind rippling through the long grass, making noise, shh, they couldn't hear the lion. The only sign of Mariel's missing was a few splotches of blood. These are splotches. So Salva is depending on his uncle. So, the important information, Mariel was killed by a lion, and he's very terrified. Because remember, Salva and Mariel were the same age and size. So, Salva stays very close to his Uncle Juir, and Uncle Juir takes care of Salva. Okay, now here they are nearing the Nile River. The landscape grew greener. The air smelled of water. So they see more green plants, and the air smelled different. Uncle explained that they would come to the river at one of its broadest stretches. So the broadest stretch is the widest part of the river. After the river, they will walk in the desert and then Ethiopia. So Mariel was correct. The group would cross the Nile in boats, and it's a very large river. So, the important information, as they walk, the landscape changes again. They are getting close to the Nile River. They will cross the river in boats. It takes 1 day to travel to an island in the middle, 1 day to finish traveling across the river. And so the river is very, very big. In total, 2 days to travel the river, to cross the river. Now, how do they build boats? Well, Salva staggered forward with yet another enormous load of reeds in his arms. So, staggered means walk not gracefully, and this is a load of books. So, he walks with a big load of reeds. These are reeds that they use to build a boat. A boat. The reeds, the plant, is called papyrus grass. Papyrus grass. So Salva's group arrives at the Nile River. They build boats, again out of papyrus. In Salva's group, there are villagers that lived near the river, near water. They know how to make boats from papyrus reeds. Salva is traumatized and sad, but working makes him feel better. He was too busy to worry much. And then finally, this page talks about how they build the boats. Watch the YouTube video link in band if you want to learn more about how to build reed boats. Okay, good. This is a prow, and these are paddles. So I hope this helps you understand Chapter 7. Finally, they finish building the boats. Here is an example of the type of boat they built out of reeds. And here is another picture. So, in 2 days, Salva's group made boats. Salva gets in the boat with his uncle to travel across the Nile River. And that is the end of chapter 7. So let's look at chapter 8. Read together. Chapter 8, Southern Sudan, 2008. It was like music, the sound of Akir's laugh. Naya's father had decided that Akir needed a doctor. So Naya and her mother had taken Akir to the special place, a big white tent full of people who were sick or hurt, with doctors and nurses to help them. After just 2 doses of medicine, Akir was nearly her old self again. She was normal. Still thin and weak, but able to laugh as Naya sat on the floor next to her cot and played a clapping game with her. So she took 2 doses of medicine, she ate medicine twice, and this is a cot. The nurse, a white woman, so Caucasian, was talking to Naya's mother. Her sickness came from the water, the nurse explained. She should drink only good, clean water. If the water is dirty, you should boil it for a count of 200 before she drinks it. Naya's mother nodded that she understood, but Naya could see the worry in her eyes. The water from the holes in the lake bed could be collected only in tiny amounts. If her mother tried to boil such a small amount, the pot would be dry long before they could count to 200. It was a good thing, then, that they would soon be returning to the village. Remember, they are at the lake camp. The water that Naya fetched from the pond in the plastic jug could be boiled before they drank it. But what about next year at the camp? And the year after that? And even at home, whenever Naya made the long walk to the pond, she had to drink as soon as she got there. She would never be able to stop Akir from doing the same. So, this is the important section. Akir became sick from the dirty water. The nurse says they need to boil the water, but they don't have enough water to boil it. Now we are talking about Salva. The lake surface was calm, and once the boats had pulled away from the shore, the edge of the river, there was not much to see, just water and more water. They paddled for hours. The scenery and motion were so monotonous that Salva might have slept, except he was afraid that if he did, he might fall over the side. He kept himself awake by counting the strokes of Uncle's paddle and trying to gauge how far the canoe traveled with every 20 strokes. Finally, the boats pulled up to an island in the middle of the river. This was where the fishermen of the Nile lived and worked. Salva was amazed by what he saw in the fishing community. It was the first place in their weeks of walking that had an abundance of food, that had a lot of food. The villagers ate a lot of fish, of course, and hippo and crocodile meat as well. But even more impressive were the number of crops of plants they grew: cassava, sugarcane, yams. It was easy to grow food when there was a whole river to water the crops. So this area had a lot of food to eat. Why? Because of water. None of the travelers had money or anything of value to trade, so they had to beg for food. The exception was Uncle. The fisherman gave him food without having to be asked. So everyone had to beg, but not Uncle. Salva could not tell if this was because Uncle seemed to be the leader of the group or because they were afraid of his gun. Uncle shared his food with Salva, a piece of sugar cane to suck on right away, then fish that they cooked over a fire, and yams roasted in the ashes. The sugar cane soothed the sharpest edge of Salva's hunger. He was able to eat the rest of the meal slowly, making each bite last a long time. At home, Salva had never been hungry. His family owned many cows. They were among the better off families in their village of Lun Arik. They ate mostly porridge made from sorghum and milk. Every so often, his father went to the marketplace by bicycle and brought home bags of beans and rice. These had been grown elsewhere. These had been grown far away because few crops could be raised in the dry, semi desert region of Lun Arik. So crops cannot grow in Lun Arik because there's not enough water. Okay. As a special treat, his father sometimes bought mango. A bag of mangoes was awkward to carry, especially when the bicycle was already loaded with other goods. So he wedged mangoes into the spokes of his bicycle wheels. So these are spokes, the metal poles, and pretend these are mangoes. So he would put mangoes in the wheels. When Salva ran to greet him, he could see the green skinned mangoes spinning gaily in a blur as his father pedaled. Salva would take a mango from the spokes almost before his father had dismounted, gotten off the bike. His mother would peel it for him, its juicy insides the same color as her headscarf. She would slice the flesh away from the big flat seed. Salva loved the sweet slices, but his favorite part was the seed. There was always plenty of fruit clung stubbornly to the seed. He would nibble, bite, and suck at it to get every last shred, making it last for hours. There were no mangoes among the fisherman's great stores, but sucking on his piece of sugar cane reminded Salva of those happier times. He wondered if he would ever again see his father riding a bicycle with mangoes in its spokes. As the sun touched the horizon, so the sunset, the fishermen abruptly went into their tents. Abruptly as quickly. They weren't really tents, just white mosquito netting hung or draped to make a space so they could lie down inside. Not one fisherman stayed to talk or eat more or do anything else. It was almost as if they all vanished at the same moment. Only a few minutes later, Mosquitoes rose up from the water, from the reeds, from everywhere. Huge dark clouds of them appeared, their high pitched whine filling the air. Thousands, maybe millions of hungry mosquitoes massed so thickly that in one breath, Salva could have ended up with a mouthful if he wasn't careful. And even if he was, they were everywhere in his eyes, nose, ears, on every part of his body. The fishermen stayed in their nets as the whole night long. They had even dug channels, holes, from inside the nets to just beyond them so they could urinate without having to leave their little tents. It didn't matter how often Salva swatted at the mosquitoes, or that one swat killed dozens. A dozen is 12 at a time. For every one he killed, it seemed that hundreds more swarmed in to take its place. With their high singing whine, with their high singing whine constantly in his ears, Salva slapped and waved at them in frustration all night long. No one in the group got any sleep. The mosquitoes made sure of that. In the morning, Salva was covered with bites. The worst ones were in the exact middle of his back, where he couldn't reach to scratch. Those he could reach, though, he scratched until they bled. So Salva got so many mosquito bites at night. The travelers, Salva's group, got into the boats one more time to paddle from the island to the other side of the Nile. Now, this is important. The fishermen had warned. Oh, and this is swatted. This is swatted. The fishermen had warned the group to take plenty of water for the next stretch of their journey. Salva still had the gourd that the old woman had given him. Others in the group had gourds too, or plastic bottles. But there were some who did not have a container. They tore strips from their clothing and soaked them in a desperate attempt to carry at least a little water with them. So some people didn't have a bottle, so they tore strips of clothing and soaked, dipped in water, the strips of fabric, in a desperate attempt to carry at least a little water. Ahead lay the most difficult part of their journey, the Akobo Desert. So, in the next chapter, Salva's group will be walking in a desert. And that's the end of chapter 8. So, we're going over on time. I want to quickly help you. Let's review the chapter 7 summary and your homework for next week. Please write this in your notebook. This is the summary for chapter 7. Pause the video and you can write this. Okay, and this is the bell ringer for chapter 8. Please write these in your notebook. Bell ringer 1. At the hospital, did Akir feel better? A. Yes. B. No. C. She didn't go to the hospital. What happened to Salva at night on the island? Question 2. A. He slept well. B. Saw a lion. C. Bitten by mosquitoes. Or D. Dreamt of his family. Please write these questions in your notebook. Which is the correct answer? And finally, for homework, write 2 sentences in your notebook about chapter 8. 1 sentence about Naya and 1 sentence about Salva. Okay, that's the video for today. Thank you. Great job. I'll see you next week. Have a good week. Goodbye.